Hello, my name is Tim Shoebridge. In this video, I'd like to give you a walkthrough of a brand new piece of software that I've developed specifically for the Sequential PRO 2 synthesizer. Now, this software is not a classic software editor. You can't use it to change all the parameters on the synth. What I've done is concentrate on one specific part of the Pro 2, and that is its delay section. Now, the delay section on the Pro 2 is incredibly comprehensive. You've got 4 delays in one, and there's an awful lot of parameters that you can change. And what I find is that I'm quite slow at setting delay effects up the way I'd like them on the Pro 2 because I'm used to, simple effects pedals, just reaching out to an effects pedal, tweaking a few knobs, and getting delay effects that way. And I'm finding that the comprehensive nature of the Pro 2 and all of those delay settings can be a little bit overwhelming. And sometimes I create a patch on the Pro 2 and I really like the delay settings that I've got, and I think, wouldn't it be nice to just be able to apply those to a different patch? But obviously you can't do that. You have to set them all up from scratch. So that's when my software comes in. It's capturing those delay settings as you make them, and then allowing you to save them as presets on your computer and then apply them to whatever patches you like on the Pro 2 in real time. I'll show you all this. That's what's coming up in this video. Now, I've given a bit of a silly name to this software. I've called it the PROcrastinator. It's a play on words. To procrastinate means to put off or to delay, basically. So that's where the name comes from. So if you are a Pro 2 owner or you're thinking about getting a Pro 2 in the future, then hopefully this video is of interest to you. Hopefully the software is of use to you as well. I found that for me it's a bit of a time saver. I really do find that I like to be able to capture preset delay settings and then apply them as I'm building patches. It saves me a lot of time, and it's sort of like gets me results much quicker than I otherwise could. So that's what's coming up in this video. I really do hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much for watching. Okay, so here is PROcrastinator. I'm showing my screen now. Let's go through the user interface section by section. There's not a lot to go through. It's a very simple user interface. It's a very simple tool, hopefully easy to use. That's my hope anyway. Let's start off with this bottom left-hand section here, MIDI, because we only need to really worry about it once. Now, PROcrastinator is fundamentally a MIDI controller. It wants to talk to your Pro 2, and ideally you'll have your Pro 2 set up so that your Pro 2 talks to PROcrastinator as well, two-way communication basically. So what we have here is synth in and synth out, and if I click in the box, you'll see what I get here is a list of all of the registered MIDI devices on my computer. Now, I've got my Pro 2 hooked up to my computer using USB. It's class compliant. You don't have to install anything. It's really simple to set up. So I'm going to choose Pro 2 there. It's at the bottom of the list. So I'll do that for synth in and for synth out. So now we have that two-way communication. Now, there is a little bit of setup that you need to make sure is correct on your Pro 2. I'll cover that later on. But that's basically it, connecting the Pro 2 in and out to PROcrastinator and making sure that your output channel here is the same channel that your Pro 2 is listening to MIDI on. That's all you need to worry about. Now let's take a look at this section here, the main section, the delay section. It's going to look very familiar to you if you are a Pro 2 owner. These buttons here down the left hand side, which select the 4 different delays, and these 3 controls here, time, amount and feedback, they match the front panel of the Pro 2. Those are the physical controls that you have on the Pro 2. Also on the Pro 2, if you hold down the button there, you'll see that you can select all of the delays at the same time, so that you can affect all of the delays at the same time when you change controls. We have that same capability here. Just press on this button here, select all, and all of the delays are selected. Now, in terms of these other controls that you see here over towards the right, these are delay parameters that aren't physical controls on the Pro 2. You have to access these through the menu system, and they're on a couple of different tabs. So you've got them all here for reference. We've got the pan, left and right. We've got a low pass frequency and high pass frequency to set the tone of the delay. We have a sync button so that you can synchronize to the clock that's either inside the Pro 2 or an external clock signal. And we have this here, it's called Bucket Brigade Delay Buffer, and it's either long or short, and this is affecting the fourth delay only, which is an emulation of a bucket brigade delay, a digital bucket brigade delay emulation. So those are all of the controls that you can set for the 4 different delays, and you see we have controls for them here, and it's quite simple. Just move these around like this, and if you have your two-way connection going on with your Pro 2, you will be affecting those parameters on your Pro 2. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you use this as a classic MIDI controller and stop touching the controls on your Pro 2 at all. They're there on the screen so you can see what the values are all in one little place. You can use your mouse and use Procrastinator's controls if you want to, but you don't have to. Because we have this two-way communication going on, I can use the controls on the Pro 2 itself. As you can see there, as I move controls, the Procrastinator is showing me in real time what I have set. And obviously I'll have to go into the menu system to change the other parameters there, but they will also be updated in real time. So you've got the choice. You can use the controls here in Procrastinator, you can carry on using the controls in your Pro 2, it really doesn't matter which. Okay, so let's look at this main section here over on the right, presets. Now, the whole reason why I developed Procrastinator in the first place was to be able to capture delay settings and store them as presets so that I could reuse them whenever I wanted to. Call up a patch on my Pro 2 and apply a set of delay settings, and I'll show you that in action in a minute. But what we have over here on the right hand side are 12 different preset slots. Once I've set these controls how I want them for whichever delays I want to use, once I've got them exactly how I want them, then I can save to whichever slot. Let's save it to slot number 1. Now all of those settings are saved permanently in slot number 1, and I can give that slot number 1 a name like that. So I've got the ability to give these slots meaningful names and save up to 12. And if I want to recall any of these presets that I've saved, just click the load button and choose. And as you'll see there, all of the controls switch to whatever's in number 2. At the moment, number 2 is empty. But if I load number 1, we'll get back the exact same settings we had before, and seamlessly in real time in the background those settings are being sent to your Pro 2, so they will be affecting and replacing whatever delay settings you already have going on your Pro 2 at that point in time. And so what that really means is that you can call up a patch or edit a patch, call up a patch, and you can try out your different presets, however many you want to try out, and apply them to the patches that you're listening to and playing on your Pro 2, and that's what I'll show you now. Right, so you'll see here I have some presets, ones that I've been fiddling around with and created so far. So I've got a very, very basic patch going on here on my Pro 2. No delay at all. And I can simply choose load and then choose any of these, and immediately you see the settings there and it's applied to the Pro 2. So now we get this. Let's try a different one. And let's try a few more. One called Nice. You get the idea, basically. Once you have captured some different delay settings and saved them as presets, you can choose any patch you like on your Pro 2 and just try them out. And if I were to save the patch on the Pro 2 right now, I would be saving whichever delay settings I have last applied. Let's just try one more. Double tap. So let's try a different patch. This is a paraphonic patch. Again, it's dry at the moment, there's no delay at all. Let's apply this first one. It's going to sound good, I hope. So as well as just applying those presets, obviously we can tweak them, we can play around with them, they can be like a starting point for us. So if I think that this is just a little bit over the top, there's just too much of the delay effect going on, maybe I want to dial it back a bit, well, on the Pro 2 we have the option to select all of the delays and to then change a parameter and affect them all, so we could turn down the amount or the feedback or whatever it is of all of them together. Now there's a downside to using the Pro 2 in that way, and that is that, you know, maybe each of these delays has got a slightly different amount or a slightly different feedback or a slightly different time. And what I'd really like to be able to do is to sort of dial them back or increase them even, but keep those relative differences between the different delays. That's something I really wanted to be able to achieve and can't without fiddling around with each one in turn on the Pro 2. And it would be the same with the Procrastinator. If I select all 4 of the delays and then move one of these controls, I am affecting all 4 at the same time. Now what I've done is I've provided a macros section down here, and what this macros section does is it has some different algorithms for intelligently changing the delay parameters altogether, but sort of, you know, maintaining some of these macros will maintain the spacing that already exists between the different delay settings. So I'll just show you that now, and then I'll go through and explain how these macros work. So if I want to just turn this effect down a bit, but keep the relative differences in the amount that there might well be between the different delays, I haven't checked, but there might well be, then what I can do is use a macro here. I can select amount. You'll see here that this is actually now disabled. I can't change this on any of the delays. You'll actually see as I flick through the different delays that this amount is set differently for each one. So I want to sort of like dial them all down but keep their relative differences, and that's what I can do with this macro. I have a control here. As you can see, I can go positive or negative, and if I drag it down negative, you can see on the screen there this amount is going down, but they're all going down, but they're all going down by their own relative amounts. When I get right down to the bottom, they're off and they all reach the bottom at the same time, but the movements in between 0 and absolute maximum, the movements are all relative. If I put this control back to 0, they all go back to their original settings as if I hadn't touched them at all. So with this macro, I can change these parameters. We've got time, amount, feedback, and pan, and I can change them non-destructively and keep sort of like the original sound of the delay settings sort of, you know, similar, if you like. So let's try this out. Let's reduce it a bit. So I can get it exactly how I like it. Once I've got it how I like it, I can save the patch on the Pro 2 with those settings exactly as they are. And if I really think that this is useful and I want to sort of like, you know, maybe reuse these settings another time, then I can save them to a spare slot in my set of 12 preset slots here. Right, so we've touched on these macros and I've showed you and the amount macro that I've got here and how it maintains the differences in the values between these different delays. but allows you to affect them all in a consistent way, either increase them or decrease them. It's a far better and more, I think, musically creative way of sort of changing the whole delay settings rather than using the sort of like select all and turn controls on the Pro 2 itself. I mean, obviously you can go into the Pro 2 and you can change each delay individually, but if you're just trying to see, you know, does this sound better, louder, softer, change the frequency amount, change the tonal qualities, change the length of the times, then being able to change each value relative to each other is a really good thing to be able to do. So we've got here amount, but we've also got time and feedback and pan. Now pan is one thing that I want to mention. So with the preset that I've got going on here, you'll see that we've got quite a lot of pan going on there, left and right, they're all the same. And obviously if I select them all and change the pan, then they're all going to be locked to exactly the same pan setting, and it doesn't make any sense to be able to do that. If I want to be able to either increase the pan spread or decrease the pan spread, I need some intelligent way of doing that rather than locking them all together. So this is what this macro is going to do here. As I move it more positive, the pan gets wider, and as I move it back to 0, it's the original position, and then as I move it negative, it goes down to the center position, as in no pan at all. So I've got complete control over the amount of pan for each of these delays. Now this one was going to the right anyway, so increasing it to maximum makes it increase to maximum on the right hand side. But this one was originally going to the left, and so by changing it to maximum, it's now maximum left, and we have maximum right, and we have maximum left. So you can see there how the original intention of the delays is maintained, left or right, and what we're doing with this macro is increasing or decreasing the spread, the panning that you've already got in your delay settings. So let's listen to that. If I bring it back down to the negative, now we'll have a mono delay effect. And I move it up. Now that was the original setting at 0. I'm not affecting these anymore, they're at their original settings. But I can pan them even further. Like that. So again, you know, same as the other macros, it's a nice way of being able to sort of dial back an effect or increase the effect and get the sound that you want to have before saving the patch on your Pro 2 and potentially saving it as a preset in PROcrastinator itself. Right, so while we're on the subject of macros, let's talk about these buttons along the bottom, because they look very similar. They are time, amount, feedback and pan, just like these ones. And there's one here called combi at the end. Now these are special macros. Now what you saw with these other macros here that are sort of like in a column is that when this dial is set to 0, they are non-destructive. They are sort of keeping the original settings that you had there for whichever parameter you want to affect. You can increase them or you can decrease them, but put it back to 0 and you've got the original delay. These ones down the bottom don't do that. These ones are destructive. As soon as I tap on these buttons, they will set that parameter to a starting point, and then they will allow you to sort of move that parameter, increase it. So let me just show you what I mean. If I click on time here, it's reset the time of all of the delays to 0. And also notice that the control here has changed. It's no longer a positive and negative control, it's now a positive only control, and it starts off at 0. And the idea with these macros along the bottom is that we start off with minimal effect, so time as short as possible, and as I move the dial up, the time increases. Now how much it increases is different from one delay to the next. So if I put it sort of midway, you'll see here how much this delay number 1 has increased. Delay number 2 has increased more. Delay number 3 has increased the least. Well, delay number 4 has increased the least. So they're all actually increasing at slightly different times. So as I move around further, you'll see that they are all at different times. When you get round to maximum, they all end up being at maximum. When you're at 0, they all end up being at 0. Not quite, actually, but close to 0. Yes, they are all at 0. There was a slight delay there in the communication of MIDI, I think. But anywhere in between, they're all at very, very slightly different settings. And so this is a way of seeing what will happen if I want to have, you know, a delay setting where I've got the amount, the pan, and the feedback, and everything else the way I want to. But let's see what happens as I increase time. And we've got them for the time, for the amount, for the feedback, and for the pan spread itself. So let's choose as a starting point a very simple preset. Let's go with this simple one here. And let's try increasing the pan spread. So pan spread, as soon as I touch on the button, they're all set to 0, or they're all the middle position if you like, no spread at all. And then as I move this up, all the way up to maximum. And if I flick through the delays, you'll see that this one went right, this one went left, this one went right but at a different amount, and this one went left at a different amount. So with pan spread, it will alternate the pans. 1 goes right, 2 goes left, 3 goes right, 4 goes left. So the general idea is, okay, I get the pan the way I want to. Let's try feedback next. So reset them all down to 0. As you can see, and you'll see there they're all at very slightly different feedback amounts. Let's do the same with time. And the same with amount. So my idea with these macros is they're a bit like using, say, a delay effect pedal, for example. With an effect pedal, you might have multiple taps, but you're going to have a sort of a single time control, or single feedback control, a single sort of mix, amount control, pan, etc. And it will be affecting those multiple taps of that delay, sort of like, you know, together. And that's the effect that you get with these different macros along the bottom here, is that you can, you know, use 1, 2, 3, 4 different controls to sort of affect all 4 of the delays at the same time and come up with some different ideas and different effects that way. Now the last button I haven't talked about is called the combi button, and what this button does is it affects them all at the same time. So when I select it, you'll see that time, amount, pan and feedback are all set down to 0, or their default positions. They're all disabled, so I can't move them here on the screen itself. And as I move this up, it's the same as me doing all 4 of these at the same time. Let's try a different patch. Now when you use this combi macro, you are affecting all 4 of the delays, and you are affecting 4 parameters per delay. So there's an awful lot of MIDI messages that are getting bursted out and sent to your Pro 2 at the same time. So there can be a little tiny sort of delays of, you know, just half a second or so before the settings that you've made on the screen are really heard. It might take just a little fraction of a second to do a catch-up. Only thing I think I haven't mentioned is I've added a delay time display here, so you can see for each of the delays exactly what the delay time is set to. You'll see here with sync on, which means it's synchronized to clock. You'll see there we've got a different display as I change the time. Sorry, I can't change the time. Let's come out of combi mode. As I change the time, you'll see that it's changing there, showing you what the synced time is. And if it's not synced, I'm showing you the milliseconds. So that's the delay time there. And the last thing to mention is this reset button. It allows you at any time to reset these controls to sort of a default that I've come up with. When you press reset, you can choose which of the delays you want to reset, or you can reset them all. Let's reset them all. And they'll go back to a default position, which works for me. The time is at the minimum, the amount is down to 0, so you don't hear any delay effect at all. There's no pan, feedback is at minimum, and the filters are set so that you can actually hear the delay if you want to add delay at any point in time. So the low pass frequency is at maximum and the high pass frequency is at minimum. So that's this delay, this reset. You can reset individual delays, as I said, or reset them all at the same time. And as you do the reset, you are immediately sending those MIDI messages to your Pro 2, so you're resetting the delay with the current patch that you're playing. Obviously nothing is saved on your Pro 2, you haven't sort of like destroyed your patch in any way, but that's sort of what you're editing right now has been reset, and of course you could save it if you wanted to. So that's basically it. That's Procrastinator. It is a way of managing these multitude of delay settings and being able to save them as handy presets that you can recall anytime you like. You can apply to any patch on your Pro 2 that you want to, and then you've got the ability to play around with them and tweak them and change them, and you can do that on the screen using this as a software MIDI controller, or you can do it with the controls on the Pro 2 as you're used to. You can do it either way. And other than that, we've got this macro section where you can apply changes to one or more parameters in kind of an intelligent way, or in a way that I think is a bit more musical, where you want to sort of maintain the sort of the individuality of the delays settings that you've got, but you might want to increase them or decrease them how you feel fit. And that's the macro section. I'm really hoping that this is a useful tool for you. Clearly there's an awful lot going on your Pro 2. Delay is just one of the many things, the many sort of circuits that the Pro 2 has. But for me, applying delay to my patches, I really miss just being able to go to an effects pedal and very, very simply change a few controls and get a delay effect going. And what Procrastinator does is it allows me to do that. And if I get a really nice delay, I really like the sound of it, I can capture it, save it as a preset, and then apply it to whatever patches I like in the future. Right, so there's just a few things I need to talk about with you regarding MIDI, things that you need to consider regarding MIDI when it comes to Procrastinator and connecting it up to your Pro 2 synth. The first thing I want to talk about is the Pro 2 MIDI USB driver. It can only be used by one software program at a time, and this could become an issue for you if you're using Procrastinator as a plugin inside your DAW. Now, I use Cubase. I don't know, I don't have a lot of experience with other DAWs, but I think they're all pretty similar. They tend to be quite bullish about their use of MIDI devices, and they tend to hog them if they possibly can. So you do need to make sure that your DAW is not accessing the Pro 2 in or out via MIDI if you want Procrastinator to do so. And so that's something that you need to check with your DAW. You might not be actively using a MIDI connection to Pro 2, but your DAW might have taken one out anyway. It might be that it's one of your list of any devices. It might be one of the devices that your DAW is potentially going to be synchronizing clock with. You need to make sure that you have got full control of Pro 2 MIDI in and MIDI out from Procrastinator and not from anywhere else. If you select Pro 2 from the list in Procrastinator and it goes back to none, it won't let you choose Pro 2. It means that something else on your computer is actively accessing and using that MIDI connection. So that's the first thing that you need to consider. The second thing is there are just a few little setup options inside the Pro 2 itself that have to be set up correctly. Now, my software uses something called NRPN in order to communicate with the Pro 2. It's like a kind of advanced MIDI protocol, and I think by default the Pro 2 is set up to use NRPNs, both incoming MIDI and outgoing MIDI, but you need to make sure that it's set up to use NRPNs in the config, and I'll show you a little screenshot here of the menu options that you need to consider. So make sure they're set to NRPN as opposed to MIDI CC. And the other thing you need to do is make sure that your Pro 2 is set up to allow it to be controlled by MIDI, because if you don't have that enabled, then Procrastinator won't be able to do anything with your Pro 2 at all. So those are the considerations really in order to make sure that Procrastinator can talk successfully to your Pro 2. It is very straightforward. There's just a few things that you need to check. Other than that, it should be plain sailing. That's it. Procrastinator will be available on the Cherry Audio website. It's a module that sits inside their Voltage Modular virtual Eurorack modular environment. Voltage Modular is completely free to download. It runs on Windows, it runs on Apple Mac as well, and it runs as a VST plugin for your DAW on both of those platforms. And Procrastinator is just a module that you buy and use inside Voltage Modular. As you can see there are no patch points on it. It is not a virtual Eurorack module in any way, shape or form. You don't have to use it with any other modules. You just have to load it into Voltage Modular like I've done here and just run it. It's as simple as that.